Oh, okay. So, clearly we're running a little late tonight. Technical difficulties. As you can see, Brett is not sitting right here next to me as he usually is. He is over there. Oh, here he is.
Here I come.
He's always wearing his superhero cape and fixing things around here.
Trying to.
Yes.
I think I got it. I think. We'll see. Switcher's been doing some fun stuff. Hey, we're live!
Oh,
all
my
right.
There we are.
And we can be heard, and isn't life grand? So, yes, you can tell we have a microphone that's not normally here because our wireless weren't working. And so we have this, and we just, as any good film crew, guerrilla filmmaking crew will tell you, duct tape and a tripod will save anything. So we have that. And we are live, so I'm going to let Wrench start talking while I share it around because we have to do everything manual tonight for some reason. So you can go ahead and start, and I'm going to make sure it's shared, and then I'll join you.
Okay, well, we're talking about the second church of the seven churches there in Revelation tonight, and that would be the Church of Smyrna. And I know Brett always likes me to read those 5 or 6 verses or so pertaining to the church, but you know what? I have just realized that I forgot to put that in my notes. So we'll be skipping that part of it. Some of you will probably be really happy about that. I don't mind myself, honestly. So I picked a verse out in there that talks about the relationship part, because that's what we're focusing on right now, is the relationship part of Revelation instead of the fear part of Revelation. So that would be Revelation 2:10. Fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that you may be tried, and ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give you a crown of life. So basically, Jesus is saying, don't worry about the stuff which you're going to suffer. And that's generally what people do, right? Worry about the stuff that the Bible says they're going to suffer, right?
Yeah. Because Smyrna is the church that it talks about, in the description, it talks about the church, you're enduring persecution. And Smyrna was actually, the church early on this is the second church, right?
Mm-hmm,
and then,
yes.
So it actually was in competition with Ephesus and another church back in its day for being the golden city, or the big best city of Asia in its day. There was a lot of competition, and Smyrna was right up there with Ephesus and the other ones. And one of the possibilities of its name comes from myrrh, the mines around Smyrna. It was a big exporter of myrrh, and so they were around the time of the Romans persecuting the Christians. So Ephesus was around the time pretty much of the early Christian church and its beginning, its foundings. And then Smyrna is actually taking place in its prophecy, in its apocalyptic placement in time. It is the persecution of the church, because at the time Smyrna was around, Romans were now feeding Christians to the lions, and persecuting the Christians for Christianity, and so that was happening a lot. They were being persecuted, and even a lot of the Jewish, not Christian Jews, but Jews themselves were persecuting Christians, and even helped lead the charge against Polycarp, one of the early Christian leaders, and were instrumental in his death. So this is where they kind of fit into history, 113 AD, during the time of Romans persecuting the Christians.
Right, okay, right. So this was about persecution and such. So this is why Jesus says, don't fear what you're going to suffer.
Right.
But what he wanted them to do was to be faithful unto death, and I will give you a crown of life. And there's the relationship part. So unto death, basically, didn't merely mean just to life's end, but even if being faithful involves death. Yeah. So sometimes being faithful feels like death. It is death itself for sure. Mm-hmm. And so anyways, he isn't necessarily saying to death itself, but even if it even if being faithful involves death.
Yeah, because then, we talk about in Bible classes, we preach about it, the dying to self and letting, things about our personalities and addictions and things like that, let them die, let ourself die. So, symbolically, spiritually, there are all kind of different ways to die. In Smyrna in its day, it was literally, physically death, and then you transport that and you kind of apply it to us today. It might mean, at some point physical death, but it could mean as well a lot of things about things that feel like, we're going to die if we give them up. But it's more of a spiritual, emotional death that we let things go.
Right. And actually, that kind of stuff that would have to be done before you could arrive to the point of dying for your faith.
Yeah.
So, and another thing that, like, if we're not focused, or we tend to focus on the persecution part of it, and oh my goodness, but also what interests us here would be the crown of life. Like, ooh, how do we get that, and such. And so we're going to talk about the crown of life that Jesus promises us if we're faithful unto death. Because
it is most of the time, again, and we've said this again, but when I was in Bible class in academy, and you hear evangelistic series, and it's all about, at least in my day when I was a teenager, it was all about the persecution and the dragon and the beast is coming after you, and it's all about how you're going to be chased, and even they had these plays they would do back in my day that was an illustration of what it would be like, and you'd be caught up in a church, and the special world church guard would come for you, and they would make you try to force you into recanting the Sabbath, and then they would shoot you, and we would do all this on stage and everything, and the focus was on that, the torture, the persecution, which is really, I don't think, anything Jesus ever intended.
Right, because clearly way back then, he says, to John, he says, tell them, fear none of these things which thou shalt suffer.
Right.
And when we are looking at fear, we tend to fear. We're looking at all those scary things, and it is fearful.
Yeah, we're kind of looking at it as, what is this more about our relationship with God? What's this more about our connection, relationship with Jesus, and the hope and the future? What's the message here to us today? Right. And that's the crown.
Right. So, and that be thou faithful unto death is the relationship, and so is I'll give thee a crown of life, which we'll get into a little more deeply in a few moments here. But so now John, he lived apparently where the Olympic Games were held. And everyone knew about the Olympic Games back then, so as everyone now, really. So many people, love to sit there and watch it and everything. And so, these days, there's a first, second, third prize and such. Back then, there was only the first prize.
Yes. We called them gold, silver, and bronze, by the way. It's gold, silver, and bronze. Not
or
really
first, second, and third.
We don't really use those terms, but that's okay, because we didn't watch the Olympics this year. We did.
Or last year.
Or
wait, they didn't have them last year.
No, they didn't have them last year.
Or the last times that they had them.
Aspen does. Aspen likes them.
Yeah.
Aspen likes to watch.
I'm not opposed to them. It just doesn't really cross my mind to watch
It doesn't, and then it's over, and then actually I heard, we're getting off topic, but I heard the coverage was really bad, this last one, like really bad, because it was in, where was it being held? Korea? Japan. That's right, Japan, and the time difference and everything, and it was like confusing. But yes, so back then it's hard to imagine that the Olympics were as well known and famous, but they really were. I mean, the guys that went to the Olympics, the guys that won at the Olympics back then were like Michael Jordan. You could say their name and even if you weren't into basketball, you know who Michael Jordan is back then. Even if you weren't into the discus throw, you knew the names of the guys who had won.
Right. So, but anyways, also when someone won, they didn't give him a crown of gold.
They didn't give him the medal.
Yeah, no. And they didn't win money for it either. They didn't
get coin or nope.
Yeah, what they got was a crown or a wreath, basically made from olive leaves.
Yep, they got a twisted branch of leaves.
Yeah, which was really, that's a lot of work for that, right? Yeah. Okay, so there's a story which is told that is relevant to the olive wreath that they received. So apparently Xerxes was interrogating some Arcadians after the Battle of Thermopylae. He inquired why there were so few Greek men defending the Thermopylae. The answer was, all other men are participating in the Olympic Games. And when asked, what is a prize for the winner? An olive wreath, came the answer. Then one of his generals uttered, good heavens, what kind of men are these against whom you have brought us to fight? Men who do not compete for possessions, but for virtue. And so, we kind of recognize, we certainly recognize living life to get ahead for things, for stuff, for gold, and such, and yet they didn't compete for that. They competed and they won that.
Won that wreath. And the wreath was, at least early on, it was taken, they were all made from the same tree, and it was in front of the temple of Zeus, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was a special, had religious significance.
Yeah, religious significance. And it was olive branch, which, interestingly enough, as you know, to, extend the olive branch is all about peace, which I thought was interesting in the symbolism of these men for virtue, and that's what they were, competing for. And instead of gold, and it was a virtue and a virtue of peace. I just kind of struck me as, oh, that's pretty cool.
Okay, and so Brett, as we were talking about this before, he said that the Olympians who competed, they competed completely naked, apparently.
Yep.
And when the guy who won a competition was crowned, all he wore was the crown.
Yep.
And a crown not made of silver or gold, a crown simply represented by his actions.
Yep. It was stripped bare of everything. All he had was that crown.
Yes. And so as we run the race of life, we too are to strip ourselves of who we think we are and who we think we need to be, and live entirely by who Jesus says that we are and who he created us to be. And so that is what our crown of life is. Because the meaning of that phrase, crown of life, is equal to also saying the life of the crown. And so just like the Olympian for whom the crown represented his actions, so too the crown of life is nothing more than the victory of the life that we have lived. And so the crown of life that Jesus gives us will represent the loving, faithful relationship we have lived out with him, and nothing else.
So what would you say, in case they did, what would you say is, because the crown of life really is the life of the crown. So what is the life of the crown?
The life of the crown is that life of victory, of faithfulness that we have lived with Jesus when we are stripped of anything we ever thought we should be. Or anybody we ever thought we were. That is entirely stripped off, and we're standing there. Well, we've run through life like that. And when we run through life not being everything we think we should be, but just living by the commands of Jesus. Because that's what living out a faithful, loving relationship with Jesus is, because he says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. So any of his commands that he gives to us, that is who we are, is to live out that. And so then living that out becomes the crown of life, because that is the life in the crown. He has given that to us, that faithful living, because he is faithful. He gives us faith, and then that loving relationship gets lived out. And and it is only there upon our heads because Jesus was victorious on the cross. I have to point that out, because except that Jesus would have died on the cross, we wouldn't even have the opportunity to live out that loving relationship.
Yeah.
Or if we did, it really wouldn't do us any good outside of here on this earth. There would have been nothing past that. So, okay.
Well, because my job is to make things simple. And
I spent so much time making it simple, you have no idea.
She does. And I just kind of scrunch it down, and I say the life of the crown is living the connection, the relationship, with Jesus. That's your life of living your relationship with Jesus, keeping His commandments.
It is a representation of our surrender to God's will rather than our own. Because also when Jesus was there, His ultimate surrender to His Father was there in the olive grove. And that long struggle, I say, Father, take this cup from me if it can be done. And, then just surrendering everything and going to the cross.
Yeah.
I found it interesting that was done in the olive grove.
Yeah, that's true.
So, anyways, last week I briefly touched on a paragraph I had written a while back. But I'd also like to take a deeper look at it today to wrap up what we're talking about. Because a faithful relationship, which is what Jesus is calling us to here in this text, is also a love lived out type of relationship. Just like like I said before, the Olympians receive that crown because of their physical actions. And love, too, is an action lived out. And that crown then would be representative of that. So, what I had written was, true love lies bleeding rather than seeking revenge. I mean, this is the stuff that we have to go to Jesus to receive the power to be able to live that out. So true love lies bleeding rather than seeking revenge. This is a death to self. True love is not blind, but seeks to help those who in their blindness cause pain to others. True love seeks to repair the bridges needed to communicate in real, loving relationships. And true love protects against the fiery words of others and allows a calm response. True love never fails because it has the strength to help those who sinned against you. And so, I want you to picture the epitome of this kind of love. To picture Jesus hanging on the cross. No truer love was ever lived out. And we would have no reason to live out that true love except that Jesus did it for us. He showed us how to live. We are to take up our crosses and follow Him. So true love lies bleeding rather than seeking revenge. True love bled on that cross. True love is not blind, but seeks to help those who in their blindness cause pain to others. True love saw the blindness of those who crucified Him and said, Father, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. And true love seeks to repair the bridges needed to communicate in real loving relationships. And true love protects against the fiery words of others and allows a calm response. See, true love kept the bridges of communication open when He died on the cross. When angry, fiery words were thrown at Jesus, He responded with calm. We would have no need to communicate with Jesus if He had not died on the cross. That would have shut down any need for communication with Him. But He died on the cross, and even though we may occasionally not be looking for any communication with Him, He is always there and ready to communicate with us because He has kept that open for us. And true love never fails because it has the strength to help those who sinned against you. True love there on the cross was held there by the strength of true love, and His death provides all the strength that we need to take up our crosses and die for those who, in an allegorical sense, who sinned against us. Because to forgive those who sinned against us requires a death of self and a living out of the true love by the true love who lives in our hearts. So this is winning the race of life. The Olympic Games, the wearing of the crown of life, is to be able to live that out with Jesus as our example, Jesus as our victory, and the one who gives us the power to do that.
So, in the Colosseum, during the time of the Church of Smyrna, they would take Christians and they would put them in, and they would let wild animals, And I'm trying to remember this story off the top of my head, but this is kind of where the Colosseum ended, the persecution, in that they took Christians and they would put them in, and I know there was this one guy, and I can't remember his name now, but, they didn't scream, they didn't run, they didn't fight, they just stood there and allowed themselves to be, killed by the lions. And the one guy I'm thinking of at the end did the same thing about, forgive the crowd for this, because in essence they don't know what they're doing. Kind of did the same thing Jesus did. And that's what brought the end of the persecution. The people in the stands, no more was it sport, no more was it entertaining and fun. I mean, here was the guy that just forgive these people for what they're about to do to me, and just allowed himself to be, killed. And that brought an end to the persecution of the Christians in the Colosseum. And that's kind of what you're talking about. Just wasn't lashing out. There wasn't revenge. There wasn't spitting at them and yelling and cursing. It was forgive them and letting himself go instead of,
And that is true strength.
Yeah.
I mean, there is so much strength in true love that it's insane. I mean, when you think about it, it is our protection. It is the protection that God protects us with that.
Yeah.
Physically, really, and spiritually.
Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what we were looking more at in the Revelation Church of Smyrna, this is what, that message is.
Yeah. So many times I think people look at that stuff in Revelation, and as true to form, we think we need to take care of ourselves. And so people will go out and make sure they have guns and ammunition and stock up on dehydrated foods and, a bunker or whatever, Mm-hmm. And, that's not the kind that taking care of ourselves is really going to do us no good. That has no protection of our souls. And this was what Jesus said, be faithful even if it leads to death. Mm-hmm. And being able, to face it like those Christians did.
So that is the Church of Smyrna.
Yeah, and we just kind of kept it short and to the point today.
Yeah. I say we kept it short. How long has it been, Aspen?
22 minutes and 47 seconds.
Woohoo, we did it.
48.
We did it. Well, it's kind of deeper thoughts, a different way to look at it. Yeah. And so, takes me all week to put it together, and then people hear it all in 22 minutes. Yes. And,
So now we will ramble about nothing for 20 more minutes, just to fill up the time.
We could, who's watching us.
Yeah, that's right.
So, But hi to the people who usually do.
Yeah.
Some of our friends and family. It's good to see you. Even though we can't really see you, we think about you before we go on.
Yeah. No.
So.
All right, so I guess next week is...
oh, yes, the third church.
Yeah, going on to...
I think it starts with a P. I can't remember right this second.
Philadelphia.
Is it Philadelphia?
I think it's Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think it was.
Philly cheesesteaks. We will be eating Philly cheesesteaks while we talk about the Church of Philadelphia.
Well, Brett may, but I won't.
So, all right. Well, thanks for joining us, and we will keep... well, we started again at the same time we always do. I know before I said we were going to start earlier, but we forgot. Basically.
And spent the afternoon shooting off rockets.
Yeah, we went to shoot rockets off, and it was way fun until Aspen ruined the whole thing by getting herself bitten by fire ants. I mean, come on. Fire ants. Actually, did they realize it was fire ants, or did we say they were carpenter ants?
They might have been carpenter ants.
They might have been carpenter
ants. But
ants.
they burned when they bit her, and not only that, they left these big welts on her.
Big welts on her. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yes, but we will endeavor to do that next week. Start earlier, yes. So, all right. Well, thanks again for joining us, and we will see you next week.